The bar was called the Broken Blade, and it lived up to its name. The furniture was old and damaged. The drinks were watered down. The lighting was dim enough that most customers appreciated not seeing what they were sitting on. But it was attached to the obsidian market, which made it convenient. And in the mercenary trade, convenience often mattered more than comfort. Kyrex sat in a corner booth nursing a drink that tasted like engine coolant mixed with regret. Other veterans had joined him. The mood was somber. They all knew what was going to happen to Taimin and his crew. They had seen it before. Some of them had barely survived it themselves. A young Velcrin mercenary approached their table nervously. His name was Hyun, and he had been in the business for less than a year. He had been about to join Taimin's crew. The money was too good to pass up, but something about the way the veterans had left the hall made him reconsider. "Can I ask you something?" Hyun said, standing a respectful distance from the table. Kyrex gestured to an empty chair. "Sit. You're smart enough to ask questions, which already makes you smarter than half the idiots who took that contract." Hyun sat down carefully.
"Why won't you take jobs involving human special forces?"
"I've heard stories, but I thought they were just stories. You know, the kind older mercenaries tell to scare the new ones." Yura laughed from across the table. She was a Torgani, which meant she had 4 eyes and skin that could change colors based on her mood. Right now she was a dull gray, the color of resignation. "Stories," she repeated. "Yes, we tell stories, but every single one of them is true. That's what makes them so terrifying." "Tell him about the glacier incident," someone said. Kyrex sighed. He had told this story 100 times. It never got easier. 20 years ago, I was younger and dumber. I worked for a Krellian mercenary company. Best in the sector, or so we thought. We got hired for a simple job. Kill a human recon team on an ice planet called Vostok Prime. 6 humans. We had 40 trained commandos. The pay was good. The job seemed easy. He took a drink. We tracked them for 3 days. They knew we were coming. They could have called for evacuation. They could have run. Instead, they stayed. On the 3rd day, we surrounded their last known position. We had them trapped in a canyon with only one exit. We had air support. We had superior numbers. We had everything. Kyrex's cybernetic eye flickered as he remembered. Then everything went wrong. The canyon was full of traps. Not just simple traps. Psychological ones. We found recordings playing on loop. They were the voices of our own squad members calling for help. We split up to investigate. That was our first mistake. The humans picked us off one by one. Not with guns. They barely used guns. They used the cold. They used the terrain. They collapsed ice shelves on top of us. They redirected geothermal vents to create steam that blinded our thermal sensors. And the worst part, Kyrex continued, was that they were always there. You'd see movement in the corner of your eye, but when you looked, nothing. You'd hear breathing in your comms, but none of your squad was near you. They got in our heads. By day 2, half my squad was firing at shadows. Hyun listened, his face growing pale. "I surrendered on day 2. Kyrex said flatly. I dropped my weapons and stood in an open area with my hands up. A human appeared from nowhere. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old. She looked at me, checked that I was unarmed, and zip-tied my hands. Then she pointed to a shelter and told me to wait inside." "What happened to the others?" Hyun asked quietly. "The ones who kept fighting? The rescue team found them 3 days later. Dead. Every single one. Arranged in a pattern visible from orbit. The pattern was a symbol in Krellian that meant warning. The humans wanted everyone to know what happens when you hunt them." The table was silent for a moment. Then Yura spoke. "My story is different, but the lesson is the same. It happened 10 years ago. A mercenary company, 200 strong, got hired to capture a human forward operating base. The base had 10 humans, just 10. The contract seemed simple. Overwhelming force. She shifted colors slightly, turning a darker gray. The mercenaries took the base in 6 hours. They had superior numbers and weapons. The humans seemed to retreat. The mercenaries celebrated. They thought they'd won. They sent a message to their contractor claiming success. Then the humans came back, Yura said softly, but they didn't attack from outside. They were already inside. They had been inside the whole time. They came from the walls, from the vents, from maintenance tunnels that shouldn't have existed. They had mapped every single hidden space in their own base. They knew every blind spot in the security system. The mercenaries tried to fight back, but they were in an unfamiliar base. The humans knew every corridor, every room, every hiding place. It became a hunting ground. When relief forces arrived 3 days later, they found the base retaken. The surviving mercenaries were locked in their own prison cells. Most of them never recovered mentally. A grizzled old mercenary at the end of the table spoke up. His name was difficult to pronounce in any language, so everyone just called him Boss. He had been in the business longer than anyone else in the room. "You want to know the real reason we don't take contracts on human special forces?" Boss said. "It's not because they're unkillable. They're not. They're flesh and blood like anyone else. It's because of what they represent." He leaned forward. "Humans come from a death world, you all know that. Earth kills its inhabitants in 1,000 different ways. Weather that can freeze you or cook you, animals that hunt in packs, diseases, natural disasters. Humans evolved to survive all of it. They're not the strongest species. They're not the fastest, but they're the most stubborn. They simply refuse to die." Boss took a drink. "When you train a human to be a soldier, you're taking that natural stubbornness and adding discipline. When you train them to be special forces, you're adding intelligence, tactics, and psychology. You're creating something that can think like a predator, plan like a general, and endure like a machine. And the scariest part?" Boss continued. "The humans we're talking about aren't even their best. The units we know about, the ones with public records, those are mid-tier. Above them are units whose names are classified. Units that operate in complete secrecy. If the special forces we know about are nightmares, those hidden units are what nightmares have nightmares about." An information broker named Bitna entered the bar. She was human herself, which made her perspective valuable. She worked in intelligence, buying and selling information across the sector. She approached their table. "I heard you're talking about Tai Min's contract," she said, sitting down uninvited. "I can tell you right now how it's going to end." "Enlighten us," Kyrex said. Bitna pulled out a datapad. "I've been tracking contracts involving human military targets for 5 years. I have records of 347 such contracts. Want to know the success rate?" "Surprise us," Yura said dryly. 10%, Bitna said. "And that's being generous. Most of those successes involved situations where the humans were already injured, cut off from support, or heavily outnumbered. Even then, the casualties on the mercenary side were astronomical." She scrolled through her data. "Every major mercenary guild in the sector has an informal blacklist. Contracts targeting human special forces are on it, not officially, because that would be bad for business. But every experienced contractor knows, you don't take those jobs. You just don't." "Then why does Thros keep offering them?" Hyun asked. "Because there's always someone dumb enough to take them," Boss said. "Young mercenaries who think the stories are exaggerated. People who need money desperately. Fools who think they're special." Bitna nodded. Thros's client probably tried hiring multiple contractors. Everyone with experience refused. So Thros came to the Obsidian market because he knew he could find someone inexperienced enough to say yes. "What unit is Tai Min going after?" Kyrex asked. Bitna checked her datapad. Tuguk 7. They're listed as a training unit. 12 operators. Based out of New Pyongyang for the last 6 months. The table went quiet. "A training unit," Yura said slowly. "That's even worse. Why is that worse?" Hyun asked. "Because training units are full of instructors," Boss explained. "These are humans who have already completed combat tours. They've already survived the worst situations. Now they're teaching the next generation. They're not just skilled. They're experienced. They know every trick because they've either used it or had it used on them." Kyrex finished his drink. "Taemin and his crew are going to land on New Pyongyang thinking they're hunting soldiers. They're actually walking into a classroom. And they're about to learn the hardest lesson of their lives. If they survive the lesson," Yura added darkly. Hyun looked at his own datapad. His finger hovered over the button that would finalize his contract with Taemin's crew. The money would change his life. But the stories he had just heard made his hand shake. He pressed the cancel button. "Smart choice," Kyrex said. "Your account might be smaller, but at least you'll be alive to spend it." Across the sector, Taemin's shuttle entered New Pyongyang's atmosphere. 30 mercenaries prepared their weapons and checked their equipment. They were confident. They were well armed. They were ready. In the forest below, 12 human operators received the alert. They looked at each other and smiled. The obsidian market floated in the darkness of space like a forgotten monument. It orbited a dying red star in the terminus sector, far from any government's reach. This was where mercenaries came to find work. This was where criminals came to hide. This was where the galaxy's most dangerous creatures gathered to sell their skills to the highest bidder. The main hall was packed tonight. Beings from 100 different worlds stood shoulder to shoulder, their weapons barely concealed beneath worn jackets and battle armor. The air stank of cheap alcohol and cheaper lies. Everyone here had killed before. Everyone here would kill again, if the price was right. Thras stood at the front of the hall. He was a Velkrin, which meant he had 4 arms and skin like polished stone. Each of his hands rested on a different weapon. His reputation preceded him. He paid well, but he also expected results. Those who failed him rarely got a second chance. The holographic display behind him showed a planet. Green forests, blue oceans, small settlements scattered across the surface. It looked peaceful. It looked easy. New Pyongyang, Thras announced, his voice cutting through the noise. The hall quieted. A human frontier colony. Small population. Limited defenses. My client wants a certain problem eliminated. He pressed a button. The display changed to show 12 faces. All human, all wearing the same gray and black uniforms. These are soldiers, Thras continued. Human special forces. They operate in the southern continent. My client believes they are interfering with certain business operations. Your job is simple. Find them, kill them, or capture them if you can. Either way, I am offering 5 million credits. Split it however you want. A murmur ran through the crowd. 5 million credits was enough to retire on. It was enough to buy a small fleet. It was enough to make a mercenary's wildest dreams come true. But then something strange happened. Kyrex stood up from his seat near the back. He was a Shalathi, reptilian and covered in old scars. Half his face was cybernetic, replaced after some long-ago battle. He had been in the mercenary business for 30 years. He had fought in wars that most of the younger mercenaries had only heard about in stories. He looked at the display for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. He said nothing. He just left. Other veterans began to follow. A Torgani bounty hunter named Yura pushed away from the bar and headed for the door. A Krellian shock trooper with medals pinned to his chest shook his head and left. One by one, the older mercenaries filed out of the hall. The younger ones looked confused. One of them, a Velkrin barely old enough to have his 3rd set of arms, called out to Kyrex. Wait, why are you leaving? That's 5 million credits. Kyrex paused at the doorway. He looked back at the young mercenary. His cybernetic eye glowed red in the dim light. Kid, he said slowly, there are 3 rules in this business. Rule 1, always get paid up front. Rule 2, never betray your crew. Rule 3, never, and I mean never, take a contract on human special forces. But they're just soldiers, the young Velkrin protested. 12 of them. We could get 100 mercenaries. We'd have numbers, weapons, everything. An old gunslinger near the bar laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. He was from a species nobody could name anymore. His people long extinct from too many wars. He had survived them all, just soldiers? The old gunslinger took a drink. You think they're just soldiers? Let me tell you something, boy. Soldiers follow orders. Soldiers fight battles. Soldiers die when you shoot them enough times. He pointed at the display with his glass. Those things up there? They're not soldiers. They're nightmares with tactical training. They're what happens when a Death World species decides to get really, really good at killing. And the scariest part? They're not even trying to kill you most of the time. When humans want you dead, you don't see them coming. Thras slammed one of his fists on the podium. Enough. These are just stories to scare children. I'm offering real money for a real job. Who here has the courage to take it? Some of the younger mercenaries looked at each other. The money was tempting. Very tempting. But the veterans were still leaving. Yura paused near the exit and called back. Thras, I've worked with you before. You've always been fair. So I'll give you some free advice. Cancel this contract. Find another way to solve your client's problem. Don't send these kids to die. I'm not paying you for advice, Thras growled. I'm paying for results. Then you'll be paying for body bags, Yura said, and left. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then a young mercenary near the front raised his hand. His name was Tai Min, a Velkrin who had only been in the business for 2 years. He was good with weapons. He was fast. He was confident. He was also young enough to think the veterans were just scared old fools. "I'll take it," Taman said. "I can put together a crew. 30 experienced fighters. We'll have the job done in a week," Thross smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Good, I'll transfer half the payment now. You get the rest when you bring me proof." As Taman began gathering his crew, Kyrex sat in a bar attached to the station. Other veterans joined him. They ordered drinks and shook their heads. "How many do you think will come back?" someone asked. "Maybe 5, Kyrex said. "If they're smart enough to run when it starts going wrong." "Should we warn them more?" "I tried," Kyrex said. "But some lessons can only be learned through experience. The question is whether they'll survive the lesson." Yura sat down next to him. I looked up the unit. Teguk 7. They're listed as a training unit. Not even combat specialists, Kyrex laughed without humor. A human training unit just made 30 mercenaries look like fools waiting to happen. That's what makes humans so terrifying. Their trainers are more dangerous than most species' elite forces. "Tell me again about the glacier incident," a younger mercenary said, sitting down nervously. He had been about to join Taman's crew but had changed his mind at the last second. Kyrex took a long drink. 20 years ago. Ice planet called Vostok Prime. A human recon team, 6 operators, was mapping the northern territories. My old crew got hired to eliminate them. We had 40 Krellian commandos. Best of the best. We had superior numbers, superior firepower, superior armor. We had orbital support. He paused, his cybernetic eye flickering. 3 days later, I was the only one left alive, and I only survived because I was smart enough to surrender on day 2. The humans never even fired their main weapons. They used the environment. They used psychology. They used tactics we didn't even know existed. When the rescue team found the others, they were arranged in a pattern you could see from orbit. A warning to anyone else who thought about hunting humans. The young mercenary looked pale. "And Taman is going after 12 of them with just 30? 30 for now," Yura said darkly. "Give it 3 days. He'll be lucky if he has 10. Back in the main hall, Taman was confident. His crew was assembling. They had weapons. They had armor. They had a plan. They had no idea what was waiting for them on New Pyongyang. In the forests of that distant world, Captain Daehyun received an alert on his tactical display. His team was gathered around a small fire eating their evening meal. "Sir, we've got incoming," said Corporal G1, looking at her datapad. "Mercenary shuttle just entered orbit. 30 heat signatures. Heavy weapons loadout." Daehyun nodded slowly. "Any communication from them?" "No, sir. They're not even pretending to be civilians." Sergeant Bora cleaned her knife and smiled. "So we're doing this the educational way?" "They haven't fired on civilians yet," Daehyun said. "So yes, we teach them why taking this contract was a mistake. Non-lethal unless necessary. Make them quit." The 12 members of Teguk 7 began preparing. They weren't worried. They weren't even particularly concerned. This was, after all, just another training exercise. For the mercenaries landing on New Pyongyang, it would be the worst week of their lives. New Pyongyang was beautiful in its own rough way. Dense forests covered most of the southern continent. Mountains rose in the distance like sleeping giants. Underground cave systems ran beneath the surface like veins through stone. It was frontier territory, the kind of place where people came to start over or to hide. Taman stood at the landing site, watching his crew unload equipment. 30 mercenaries, all experienced, all armed with the best weapons money could buy. They had thermal imaging, drone support, and orbital reconnaissance. They had everything they needed to complete this mission. He felt confident. The veterans back at Obsidian Market were just scared old fools who had lost their edge. This would be simple. Find 12 humans. Eliminate them. Collect 5 million credits. Go home rich. Set up base camp here, Taman ordered. "I want a perimeter established. Motion sensors every 50 meters. Automated turrets at the cardinal points. We're not taking chances." His second-in-command, a female Velkrin named Kira, nodded. She was older than Taman, more experienced. She had worked with him for a year and respected his tactical mind. But something about this job made her nervous. "Sir, should we announce our presence to the local authorities?" Kira asked. "Standard protocol for operating in populated territory." "No," Taman said. "The humans will know we're here soon enough. Better to maintain the element of surprise." The first day went smoothly. They established camp. They sent out reconnaissance drones to map the surrounding area. Their sensors detected no hostile activity. The forest was quiet except for native wildlife. Too quiet, Kira thought, but she kept that to herself. They found traces of the human Special Forces unit by midday. A campsite recently abandoned, supply caches hidden in the trees, communications equipment buried in waterproof containers. Everything pointed to a professional operation, but nothing seemed threatening. "They're just 12 soldiers," one of the younger mercenaries said. "We have them outnumbered and outgunned. This is going to be easy money." That night, the first drone malfunctioned, then another, then 3 more. Taemin gathered his technical specialists. "What's wrong with the drones?" "Nothing's wrong with them, sir," the tech specialist said, looking confused. "They're working perfectly. They've just been reprogrammed." "Reprogrammed? By who?" The tech specialist showed him the footage. It was from one of their own drones looking down at their camp. The camera zoomed in on Taemin standing at the command tent. Then text appeared on the screen in perfect Velcrin. "We see you. You should leave." The message disappeared. The drone returned to its patrol pattern as if nothing had happened. The camp fell silent. 30 hardened mercenaries looked at each other nervously. Someone had hacked their drones without triggering any security alarms. Someone was watching them. Someone was sending a message. "It's a bluff," Taemin said, though his voice was less confident than before. "They're trying to scare us. Double the watch. Keep the sensors active. We continue as planned." Kira wanted to suggest they reconsider, but she was a soldier. She followed orders. The second day brought more strange occurrences. Equipment went missing. Not all of it, just small things. A scope from a rifle, a power cell from a comm unit, a single boot from one mercenary's pack. The items would reappear hours later in different locations, always somewhere impossible. A mercenary found his missing scope hanging from a tree branch 50 meters outside the perimeter. He had checked that tree an hour ago. Nothing was there. Now his scope hung from a thin wire swaying gently in the breeze. "How did they get past our sensors?" someone asked. "They didn't," the technical specialist said, reviewing the logs. "According to our sensors, no one entered or left the perimeter all night. But your scope is out there. So either our sensors are worthless, or they're moving in ways our sensors can't detect." Neither option was comforting. The third day, mercenaries started disappearing. The first was a scout on morning patrol. He was there one moment communicating normally. Then his comm went silent. When the search team found his position, he was gone. His weapon was there, neatly disassembled and laid out on the ground. His armor was there, folded carefully, but he was nowhere. They found him 3 hours later sitting at the edge of camp. He was unharmed, confused, terrified. "What happened?" Taemin demanded. The scout's hands shook as he spoke. "I was on patrol. Standard route. Then I felt something touch my neck, not hard, gentle, like someone was checking my pulse. I reached for my weapon, but it wasn't there anymore. I spun around, nobody. I activated my helmet's rear camera, nobody. Then everything went dark." "They knocked you out?" "I don't know," the scout said. "I woke up in a cave 5 kilometers from here. All my weapons were disassembled next to me. My armor was folded, and there was a note pinned to my chest." He held up a piece of paper. Written in neat Velcrin script, it said, "Warning number 1, leave now." "I never saw them," the scout whispered. "I never heard them. They were ghosts." More mercenaries disappeared that day. One vanished from inside the camp while others were looking directly at the area. The security footage showed nothing. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. They found him an hour later, zip-tied to a tree a kilometer away, unharmed but shaking with fear. By the 4th day, Taemin had lost 10 mercenaries. Not killed, not captured, just scared away. They took their weapons and ran to the landing site, demanding to be evacuated. The shuttle pilot, seeing their terror, agreed to take them. That left 20 mercenaries, still outnumbering the humans, still technically superior in firepower, but morale was collapsing. "This isn't normal warfare," Kira said quietly to Taemin. "They're not trying to kill us. They're trying to break us, and it's working." "We're mercenaries," Taemin snapped. "We don't break." But even as he said it, he could feel the fear in the camp. His people jumped at shadows. They fired at sounds in the forest. They reported seeing movement everywhere, but no one could ever confirm it. The humans were in their heads. That night, the sounds started. Strange noises echoed through the forest. Sometimes it was laughter. Sometimes it was whispers in languages the mercenaries didn't know. Once, every mercenary heard what sounded like their own voice calling for help from different directions. It's psychological warfare, Kira said. They're using speakers hidden in the forest. We need to find them and destroy them. They sent teams to locate the sound sources. The teams found nothing. But while they were gone, more equipment disappeared from camp. When the teams returned, they found their own missing gear arranged in neat rows outside the perimeter, along with another note. Warning number 2, this is your last chance. On the 5th day, half of the remaining crew deserted. They couldn't take it anymore. The constant fear. The feeling of being watched. The knowledge that invisible enemies could reach them anytime, anywhere, and they couldn't do anything about it. The shuttle took them away, leaving Timon with just 12 mercenaries. 12 against 12, equal numbers. But they were exhausted, scared, and broken. Timon contacted Thros on encrypted channels. We need extraction, he said, hating how desperate he sounded. The situation is not what we expected. We need reinforcements or we need to abort. Abort? Thros's voice was cold. I paid you for results. Get me results or don't come back at all. The communication ended. Kira looked at Timon. What do we do? Timon stared at the map. They had accomplished nothing. They had lost 20 people without firing a shot in anger. The humans were still out there watching, waiting, playing with them like a cat plays with prey. And then Timon made a decision. It was a desperate decision. A terrible decision. But he was out of options. We take hostages, he said quietly. Kira stared at him. What? The civilian settlement is 20 kilometers north. We go there. We take hostages. The humans will have to come out and negotiate. When they do, we'll have leverage. That's a war crime, Kira said flatly. We're mercenaries, Timon replied. We're already criminals. At least this way we survive, Kira wanted to argue. She wanted to refuse. But she was also tired and scared and wanted to go home, so she nodded. The 12 mercenaries prepared to move on the civilian settlement. In the forest, Corporal Jiwon monitored their communications. She looked up at Captain Daehyun, her expression serious. Sir, they're planning to take hostages. The northern settlement. The mood in the human camp changed instantly. For 4 days they had been playing, teaching, giving the mercenaries every chance to leave. But now the mercenaries had crossed a line. New rules, Daehyun said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. They had multiple chances to walk away. They chose to threaten civilians. We're no longer in training mode. Bora, what's our fastest route to intercept? Sergeant Bora pulled up a tactical map. We can reach the settlement in 40 minutes if we use the tunnel system. They'll take at least 2 hours through the forest. Then we move now, Daehyun said. Jiwon, send them one last message, Jiwon typed quickly. On every screen in the mercenary camp, text appeared. You had multiple chances to leave. You chose violence against civilians. The rules have changed. Run while you still can. But Timon was beyond reason now. He had committed. He was going to see this through. It was the biggest mistake of his life. Another mercenary crew had taken a contract on human special forces. Another crew had failed completely. The legend grew stronger. The trial was held on New Pyongyang 3 weeks after the incident. It was a simple affair under galactic law. Timon and his crew were charged with attempted assault on civilian populations. The evidence was overwhelming. They had been caught before they could harm anyone, but their intent was clear. What made the trial unusual was that it became the most watched legal proceeding in the sector. Not because of the charges, not because of the defendants, but because the tactical recordings from the human special forces team were entered as evidence. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the footage played. They saw the mercenaries, landing with confidence and superior numbers. They saw the humans watching from concealment. They saw the psychological warfare campaign, the hacked drones, the disappeared mercenaries found unharmed but terrified, the warnings given again and again. Then they saw what happened when the mercenaries chose to threaten civilians. The footage showed the assault on the mining facility from multiple angles. Helmet cameras from each human operator, the synchronized movements, the perfect timing, the non-lethal takedowns executed with surgical precision. 12 humans dismantling 12 mercenaries in fortified positions in under an hour. Military analysts across the galaxy studied the footage frame by frame. Tactical schools added it to their curriculum. Every major military organization wanted to understand how such a small unit could be so effective. On the Obsidian Market, Kyrex watched the trial broadcast in the Broken Blade bar. Other veterans sat with him. They were not surprised by what they saw. They had lived through similar experiences. I tried to warn them, Kyrex said quietly. We all did, Yura replied. She had changed colors to a deep blue, the Torgani expression of sadness. But some lessons can only be learned through experience. The bar was more crowded than usual. Young mercenaries who had ignored the warnings before were now paying attention. They watched the footage with pale faces and wide eyes. They could have killed them all in the first hour, someone whispered. But they didn't, Kyrex said loudly, making sure everyone heard. That's what makes humans so dangerous. They have the discipline to choose when not to kill. They gave those mercenaries 4 days to leave. 4 days of warnings, 4 days of non-lethal deterrence. That's not weakness. That's confidence. That's control, Yura nodded. I've been researching human military structure. What we call special forces is only their middle tier. Above them are units that aren't publicly acknowledged. Units with names that are whispered. 707th, White Tigers, Ghosts of Jeju. If standard special forces are nightmares, those units are what nightmares fear. A young mercenary raised his hand nervously. But humans can be killed, right? They're not invincible. Of course they can be killed, Kyrex said. They're flesh and blood. But here's what you need to understand. Killing a human special forces operator requires you to be better than they are at tactics, better at survival, better at adapting. And humans have been training for warfare since their species learned to throw rocks. Good luck being better than them. Boss, the old mercenary, spoke up from the corner. I've been in this business for 40 years. I've fought in 20 major conflicts. I've seen entire armies broken. But I've never seen anything like human special forces. They're patient. They're creative. They're absolutely ruthless when necessary, but controlled when possible. That combination is what makes them unstoppable. The footage continued. It showed Captain Dae-hyun calmly explaining his actions to New Pyongyang security forces. It showed the mercenaries being treated fairly, given medical attention, processed according to law. The humans could have executed them for threatening civilians. Many species would have, but they chose justice over revenge. That's another thing that terrifies me, Yura said softly. Humans have all that capability, all that lethality, and they choose restraint. They follow rules even when it would be easier not to. What do you do against an enemy that's both deadly and disciplined? You don't fight them, Boss said simply. That's the lesson. News of the trial spread across the mercenary networks. Within days, every major guild and contractor knew what had happened. The footage was analyzed. The tactics were studied. The warnings from veterans were finally taken seriously. Thros, the Velkrin who had offered the original contract, found himself blacklisted. Other mercenary groups refused to work with him. His reputation was destroyed. Not just because the mission failed, but because he had knowingly sent mercenaries on a suicide mission. In the ruthless world of hired guns, there was a strange code of honor. You could be a killer for hire, but you did not send your people to die on impossible missions. Meanwhile, the human diplomatic response was measured and clear. Council Representative Bitna held a press conference that was broadcast across the sector. She stood at a podium looking calm and professional. The Terrasphere does not seek conflict, she began. Our Special Forces personnel serve in frontier regions to protect both our citizens and our neighbors from genuine threats. When mercenaries were hired to kill our soldiers, we responded with restraint. When those same mercenaries threatened innocent civilians, we responded with justice. She paused, letting her words sink in. Let this be understood across the galaxy. We prefer peace. We value cooperation. We seek diplomatic solutions. But we are exceptionally skilled at war. Our soldiers are trained to the highest standards. They are equipped with advanced technology. They are supported by a military structure that has been refined over centuries. Anyone who chooses to attack our people should understand what they are choosing. The message was clear. Humans were not looking for fights, but they would win any fight that came to them. Admiral Yunseo, who commanded human military forces in the sector, held a private briefing for sector commanders. The meeting was classified, but parts of it leaked. Teguk 7 performed exactly as trained, Admiral Yunseo said. They could have eliminated the mercenary threat immediately. Instead, they chose proportional response until civilians were endangered. This is what separates soldiers from killers. judgment, restraint, and decisive action when necessary. She looked around the room at the various alien military officers. Some of you have asked about training partnerships. We are open to that. We believe that raising the overall security capabilities in this sector benefits everyone. But understand, we cannot make your forces as effective as ours. Humans have advantages that come from our evolutionary history. What we can teach is methodology, tactics, and discipline. One Velcrin commander raised his hand.
Why share your knowledge?
Doesn't that reduce your military advantage? Admiral Yunseo smiled slightly. Because we're not looking to dominate through military superiority. We're looking to build a stable sector where conflicts are rare. If sharing our training methods makes everyone safer, that serves our interests. But there was something else that few people knew. Something that only came to light when information broker Hyun dug deep into classified records. She shared her findings with Kyrex and the other veterans in the bar one evening. I found something interesting, Hyun said, pulling up data on her pad. Taguk 7, the unit that captured Taemin's crew, is listed as a training unit. We know that, Kyrex said. But do you know what that means? Hyun asked. They're instructors. They're not even combat specialized. They're the people who teach combat specialists. They were on New Pyongyang preparing for deployment to a training facility. The table went silent. You're telling me, Yura said slowly, that Taemin and his crew were defeated by human special forces instructors? Not even their combat teams? Correct, Hyun said. The truly elite human units, the ones that handle high-threat missions, are even more capable than what we saw in that footage. Kyrex put his head in his hands. That's terrifying. It gets better, Hyun continued. I accessed some human military databases, very carefully through public information requests. Teguk 7 is ranked in the middle tier of human special forces competency. There are units above them that handle counterterrorism, hostage rescue, and strategic missions. And above those are the units that don't officially exist. I think, Boss said quietly, we should add a new rule to the mercenary code. What rule? Someone asked. Never accept contracts targeting human military personnel. Period. Not just special forces. Any humans, because even their regular soldiers are dangerous and their special forces are nightmares, and their elite units are beyond our ability to fight. The suggestion spread through the mercenary networks. Within weeks, it became unofficial policy among contractors. The bounty on human military targets did not increase. It disappeared entirely. No amount of money was worth facing what those contracts entailed. 6 months passed. The incident on New Pyongyang became a case study in military schools across the galaxy. The footage was shown to every military officer. The tactics were analyzed by every strategic planner. The humans had not just won a small engagement. They had changed the entire security dynamic of the sector. Pirate attacks on human shipping lanes dropped to zero. Insurgent groups that had targeted human colonies explicitly excluded them from future operations. Even criminal organizations avoided human territories. The calculation was C. The forest was dark as Taemin led his remaining 12 mercenaries toward the civilian settlement. They moved in tactical formation, weapons ready, sensors active. Every shadow made them jump. Every sound made them aim their guns. The fear from the previous days had not left them. It had only grown worse. Kira moved beside Taemin, her 4 arms each holding a different weapon. She had not slept well in 3 days. None of them had, but they were committed now. There was no turning back. Contact in 15 minutes, their navigator said quietly. The settlement has about 200 civilians. No military presence except the Special Forces unit we're hunting. And where are the humans? Taemin asked. Unknown. Our sensors have been unreliable since we landed. That was an understatement. Their sensors were worse than useless. They showed false readings. They missed obvious threats. It was as if the entire forest was working against them. They were 3 kilometers from the settlement when everything changed. The first explosion was not large. It did not kill anyone, but it destroyed their shuttle. Taemin watched on his tactical display as his only means of escape turned into a fireball visible even from kilometers away. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Then Sergeant Bora's voice came through every comm channel. It was calm, professional, terrifying in its certainty. Attention, mercenary forces. You have chosen to threaten civilian lives. We are no longer operating under non-lethal protocols, Surrender now and you will be taken into custody unharmed. Continue toward the settlement and we will stop you by any means necessary. You have 30 seconds to decide. Taemin looked at his crew. They looked back at him with fear in their eyes. One of them started to lower his weapon. No, Taemin shouted. We don't surrender. We push forward. We're still 12 strong. We can still do this. It was the adrenaline talking. It was the fear. It was the desperation of a man who had already lost everything and could not accept it. Move, he ordered. They moved. That was when the real fighting started. Corporal Jiwon sat in front of a portable console 2 kilometers away. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. Within seconds, every piece of electronic equipment the mercenaries carried began malfunctioning. Comm systems filled with static. Targeting computers showed false readings. Night vision goggles displayed inverted colors. Weapon safeties locked. Electronic warfare package deployed, Jiwon reported calmly. They're blind and deaf. Private Sangwoo lay on a ridge 800 meters from the mercenary position. He looked through his rifle scope, calm despite the chaos. His job was not to kill, not yet. His job was to remove their capability to fight. He fired. The round hit a mercenary's rifle, shattering it. The mercenary dropped the weapon and dove for cover, unharmed but unarmed. Sangwoo fired again. Another weapon destroyed. Then another. He worked methodically, professionally, removing their ability to threaten anyone. 4 weapons disabled, Sangwoo reported. No casualties. Taemin realized with horror that they were being taken apart piece by piece. The humans were not trying to kill them. They were disarming them, dismantling them, showing them exactly how outmatched they were. Fall back to the mining facility, Taemin ordered. We can fortify there. The abandoned mining facility was a kilometer away. It was old but solid. Concrete walls, defensive positions, automated turrets they had installed yesterday. It was the best defensive position they had. The mercenaries ran. The humans let them run. They reached the facility and sealed the doors. Set up firing positions, Taemin ordered. They can't get to us here. We have overlapping fields of fire. We have automated defenses. We have the advantage. Kira wanted to point out that they had thought they had the advantage every single day, but she said nothing. She just took her position and waited. Captain Daehyun stood in the forest with his team. They had surrounded the mining facility. They had complete tactical awareness. They knew exactly where every mercenary was positioned. Bora, what's your assessment? Daehyun asked. Sergeant Bora studied the facility through binoculars. Solid defensive position. They've got good sight lines. The automated turrets will be problematic. Main entrance is too exposed for a frontal assault. Good thing we're not using the main entrance, Daehyun said. He pulled up a map on his datapad. It showed the underground tunnel system beneath the facility. G1, can you access the mining company's old survey data? Already done, sir. The main shaft connects to their position. We can breach from below. Then let's teach them another lesson, Daehyun said. Remember, we're trying to take them alive. They're misguided, not evil. Yet, the mercenaries waited inside the facility. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. They started to relax slightly. Maybe the humans would not attack. Maybe they would negotiate. Then the lights went out, generators down. Someone shouted. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. Then the automated turrets turned on their own operators. What's happening? Taemin screamed. The turrets have been hacked, a tech specialist yelled. They're targeting us. The mercenaries dove for cover as their own defenses opened fire. The turrets were set to non-lethal rounds, but being hit still hurt. Mercenaries scrambled to destroy their own security system. Then the floor exploded. Not a violent explosion. A controlled breach. Smoke grenades filled the room. Through the smoke came the humans. They moved like nothing Taemin had ever seen. Fast, precise, coordinated. They did not run. They flowed through the space like water, each one covering the others, every movement practiced 1,000 times. Bora was first through the breach. She moved with absolute confidence. A mercenary tried to raise his weapon. She disarmed him in 2 moves, had him on the ground in 3, zip-tied in 4. Total time 3 seconds. Another human operator cleared a room by himself. 4 mercenaries inside. He used a sonic weapon that made them clutch their ears and drop their weapons. Then he was on them, using non-lethal force, moving so fast they could not track him. Taemin fired his weapon at a shadow. The shadow was not there anymore. Something hit him from behind, not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to stun. His weapon was taken from his hands. He was on the ground. Someone was zip-tying his wrists. He looked up into the face of Captain Dae-hyun. "It's over," Dae-hyun said quietly. "Stop fighting." The entire assault took 40 minutes. 40 minutes to breach a fortified position that should have taken hours to crack. 40 minutes to disable 12 desperate mercenaries without killing a single one. When it was over, the mercenaries sat in a row, hands bound, weapons confiscated. They were bruised. They were exhausted, but they were alive. Kira looked at Sergeant Bora. "Why?" she asked. "Why didn't you just kill us?" "You could have. It would have been easier." Bora crouched down to Kira's level. "Because we're soldiers, not murderers. You came here to do a job. You made bad choices, but you didn't actually hurt anyone. That matters." "You gave us so many chances to leave," Kira said softly. "We did," Bora agreed. "But you chose to threaten civilians. That's when we stopped being nice." Taemin sat in silence, staring at nothing. His entire crew was captured. His ship was destroyed. His contract was failed. And he had never even seen the humans until they were already on top of him. Dae-hyun made a call to the local security forces. "We have 12 mercenaries in custody. They attempted to threaten civilian populations. We're transferring them to your authority." As they waited for the security forces to arrive, Private Sang-woo approached Taemin. "Can I give you some advice?" Sang-woo asked. Taemin looked up at the young human. He looked barely old enough to be a soldier. But his eyes were old, experienced. "What?" Taemin asked bitterly. "Next time someone tells you not to take a contract, listen to them. The veterans at Obsidian Market tried to warn you. They knew. They had learned this lesson the hard way. You could have saved yourself a lot of trouble if you had just listened." "Why are you so good at this?" Taemin asked. "We had training. We had experience. But you took us apart like we were children." Sang-woo considered the question. "My people come from a planet that tried to kill us every day. Weather, animals, disease, other humans. We learned to survive by being smarter, tougher, and more adaptable than anything that wanted us dead. When you train that survival instinct with military discipline, you get special forces." He looked at the captured mercenaries. "You're not bad soldiers," Sang-woo continued. "You're just not used to fighting people like us. People who have been training for this their whole lives. People who see warfare as a science, not just violence." The security forces arrived. They loaded the mercenaries onto a transport. As Taemin was being led away, he looked back at the 12 human operators. They were cleaning their weapons, checking their equipment, getting ready for the next mission. They looked tired but satisfied. They had done their job. They had protected civilians. They had captured threats without unnecessary violence. They were professionals, and Taemin finally understood why the veterans had walked away from the contract. Why the stories were told with such fear. Why you never ever took jobs targeting human special forces. Because they were not just soldiers. They were artists of warfare, and he had been foolish enough to think he could fight them and win. The transport left New Pyongyang. In orbit, word was already spreading.